Federal officials announced plans to give work permits to young illegal immigrants. That story coming up on KPBS Evening Edition. And how a San Diego museum got caught in a case involving these fake news releases. The U.S. Attorney's Office is looking into the hoax.
Coming up, we'll take a closer look at San Diego's unusual mayoral race, who's ahead, who's got more money, and why both candidates hired members of the opposite party. And we talk with actor Robert Foxworth about his role in the Old Globe's production of Inherit the Wind, and why the story remains controversial 8 decades after the Scopes monkey trials.
And a new report says high-speed rail will be good for California's environment, even if it doesn't get a lot of passengers. KPBS Evening Edition starts now. Hello, good evening. I'm Dwayne Brown. Thanks for joining us. Immigration officials are getting ready to grant temporary work permits to young illegal immigrants. They'll start taking applications on August 15th. The permits will cost $465. To be eligible, applicants must have arrived in the U.S. before their 16th birthday. They have to be under the age of 30 and lived in the U.S. at least 5 years. Applicants also have to be in school, graduated, or in the military. They're disqualified if they've been convicted of a felony, 3 misdemeanors, or 1 significant misdemeanor, such as driving under the influence or gun or sex offenses. Principals, vice principals, and other school administrators have negotiated a tentative contract with San Diego Unified School District. The deal expected to help the district cope with state budget cuts. It restores last year's furloughs, defers cost of living raises, and includes additional furlough days if a state tax measure fails in November. The agreement is similar to those reached with other union and non-union school employees. San Diego Unified would have to cut an estimated $40 million from its mid-year budget if the tax measure fails. San Diego County will get nearly $1 million in a settlement with 3 tuna companies. Bumblebee Foods is joining StarKist and the parent company of Chicken of the Sea in the deal. They were accused of putting less tuna and more water and other ingredients in their cans. Marin and Riverside counties will also get close to $1 million each. The tuna packers aren't admitting any wrongdoing. The settlement also requires giving $300,000 worth of canned tuna to food banks throughout the state. Drug agents say they're seizing far fewer marijuana plants these days. In California, the numbers dropped almost in half, but the DEA says it's recovered twice as much bulk processed marijuana. Agents say budget cuts are one reason they're not raiding as many pot farms, and growers are also shifting tactics, moving indoors or planting in smaller areas. Medical marijuana advocates staged an elaborate hoax this week. It targeted San Diego's U.S. attorney and even fooled the media. It turns out the San Diego Museum of Art is connected to the hoax. KPBS arts reporter Angela Carone has been following this. She joins us from the news center with an update on the story. Angela, what part did the museum actually play in this hoax?
Well, the museum invited the Yes Men to San Diego to give a keynote address, and the Yes Men are famous for staging elaborate pranks for progressive causes. They like to go after big corporations, and they often use the media as their puppet in these pranks. While the Yes Men were here, they hosted a workshop to teach local activists how to come up with their own pranks, and that's what was led to the hoax created by medical marijuana advocates, earlier this week, where they sent out fake press releases from the U.S. Attorney's Office saying they were going to close regular pharmacies.
So what does the museum say about their specific role?
Well, they say they had nothing to do with the prank or the workshop where it originated, despite having invited the Yes Men to San Diego. But the North County Times is reporting that the museum helped organize the workshops by inviting local activists to participate and even funding each of the activists' projects with $100 seed money. The museum has denied providing these funds. Meanwhile, the U.S. Attorney's Office is not commenting. As you might expect, they weren't thrilled with the hoax, and they're investigating possible criminal charges.
Sounds like we may hear more about this. KPBS arts reporter Angela Carone. California's Finance Department has finished a review of more than 500 special funds and hasn't found any hidden money. The audit came after news state parks officials had hidden $54 million in special funds. Officials say there were some accounting discrepancies, but no outright deceptions. The state's controversial high-speed rail project is getting support from environmental researchers. A new report out says the bullet train will reduce California's carbon footprint even if ridership is lower than expected. The report comes from researchers at Arizona State and UC Berkeley. They say high-speed rail will reduce greenhouse gas emissions from long-distance transportation. California is leading the way in farmers markets. The U.S. Agricultural Department says our state has nearly 11% of the nation's farmers markets, and the national number has gone up nearly 10% over the past year. Demand for locally grown fruits and veggies is apparently driving the increase. As the campaign for San Diego mayor gets closer to its traditional Labor Day launch, Peggy Pico takes a closer look at where things stand in this unusual race.
Conservative City Councilman Carl DeMaio has the money, while Liberal Congressman Bob Filner leads in early polls. Both have hired members of the opposite party for their campaign and have changed their mind on several issues. Here with more details on the unusual mayor's race is Scott Lewis with Voice of San Diego. Scott, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
This cross-pollination that's going on, Republicans hiring Democrats, Democrats hiring Republicans, what's that about, and is it unusual?
Right. Well, you have two teams of people. On the left, you've got Bob Filner. On the right, you've got Carl DeMaio. And they both began this campaign and ran their campaigns based on throwing the people who have been in charge of the city out. You know, they both are very comfortable with their bases, the people who support them, and their core issues. And so now they have to decide how they're going to win. And the way they're going to win, apparently, is to not throw out the people who are in charge, but actually start to court them. And so the establishment is now, I think, asserting its kingmaker authority, and they are, in various ways, smoothing out their more rough edges to appeal to them.
To get the votes.
Yeah.
Is this unusual? I mean, consultants for campaigns, they switch ships sometimes?
Yeah, sure. So this week we had Bob Filner, the Liberal running. He ended up hiring one of the most legendary, I think, political consultants in San Diego's history, which is Tom Shepard. Tom ran the campaigns of Mayor Jerry Sanders, of Susan Golding, of Roger Hedgecock, going back a long way. And then he joined this very progressive congressman, which was strange because he's always mostly been with Republicans. Now, he has supported Democrats in the past, so it's not completely strange. But what is strange is just how much apparently he loathes Carl DeMaio, who Filner's running against. And I think that's coming out very clearly. And he's made a decision, and I think a lot of people he's hoping will make the decision that the best way to get what they want out of the city, some of these big projects, some of these hopes, is to support Filner now. And so they're going to work on that. But it's a fascinating marriage of political convenience. Yeah.
Who's ahead right now in the polls?
You know, I don't know. There's some that come out. There was one that school district did for its own efforts, and Labor purchased a part of that showed that Filner was ahead. But the school district doesn't cover the whole city, so there was some concern about its accuracy. It did show Filner ahead, but I think that Filner does have a slight advantage in some ways because it's a presidential election. There'll be a lot of Democrats voting. He is a Democrat. There's a lot more Democrats in San Diego. But also, Carl DeMaio is much more organized, much better funded, and he just has an army of very loyal people working on his behalf. So it's going to be fun to watch, but it's also going to be very tense.
Yes, you were talking about the funding on that. Where is the money coming from? Who has the most money, and where is it coming from?
Carl DeMaio's put in several. I think he's put in $1 to $2 million of his own invested in it. He's also raised a ton of money from traditional Republican sources, builders, and all that. Bob Filner has not raised money. He began this race very confident, almost with a little hubris, and now he's pulled that back. He's been humbled a little bit. He's going to try to raise money. Tom Shepard, his new consultant, will work on that a lot. And so I think Carl DeMaio has the organizational advantage. Bob Filner has the demographic advantage.
Both candidates have changed their mind on several issues, including the pension reform or the pension initiative, Prop B. Tell me about that.
Well, Bob Filner called it a fraud. And now he says he's going to implement it, and in a way that's more powerful than if he just let it go through and sort of followed it by the letter. And he also abandoned his push to sort of borrow money to invest it in the pension system and said that that's irrelevant now because he's going to support this reform that he called a fraud. And so I think it's fascinating that he's abandoned that. The two don't relate. He could still do his old plan, but he's trying again to throw these things, these bones to the establishment. He also embraced the convention center, so he's going to work to get that done after calling that a boondoggle and a handout.
It was a switch, and DeMaio as well made some.
DeMaio's done a lot of switches. He said he was going to eliminate or cut a lot of arts funding. Ends up now saying he's going to double arts funding. Those sorts of things are all made to be more appealing to a certain constituency. Yeah.
We only have a few seconds left,
Yeah.
but I wanted to ask you, is this just an image thing? Are they just trying to spin what they're really going to do, or are they really going to reach out across
These are substantive policy changes, and I think that they're not necessarily reaching left to right or right to left, but they are reaching out to coalitions who have traditionally been powerful in San Diego, who were upset that their sort of traditional candidate, Nathan Fletcher or Bonnie DeManis, didn't make it.
All right, Scott Lewis, Voice of San Diego, thanks so much for talking with us.
Thank you.
By the way, so far, Councilman Carl DeMaio has spent more than $2 million on the mayoral race, while his rival, Congressman Bob Filner, has spent about $550,000. Peggy will have more on campaign contributions in just a moment. A San Diego organization supporting troops and the families they leave behind is putting on a special weekend event to give junior enlisted and wounded warrior families help with back-to-school supplies. Operation Homefront is a nonprofit serving some of the military's lowest paid service members and families. About 1,000 kids will receive backpacks and school supplies this weekend in the South Bay. Organizers like Jay Anderson say the high cost of living in San Diego make it harder to stretch a tight military budget. He says children are often overlooked when it comes to counting the cost.
It's not just come in, here's your backpack and leave. We make it a process because military kids don't get a lot of choices in life. And I will kid you not, I have seen a young man hold up 2 identical wooden rulers back and forth, finally made his choice, and that's empowering that child. And that's doubly important. Maybe dad's overseas, and the kid didn't choose for dad to be overseas. So if we can give him something that he can choose, something where he can make the decision, or she, then we're contributing to that wellness in the family.
Operation Homefront provides emergency assistance to needy military families in 27 states. The backpack giveaway is on Saturday and Sunday in National City from 10 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon, but participants must sign up in advance online. You can find them at operationhome.net/SoCal. Major political conventions and debates are about to kick off across the nation, but when does campaign support at work or at church cross the line? Peggy is looking into that issue.
The outcome of local and national political campaigns means a lot to corporations, companies, and even church members. Political discussions inevitably come about at these places, but is it appropriate for your boss or company to urge you to donate or support a political cause or candidate? And is it legal for your clergy to use the pulpit to tell you how to vote? Here to talk about where to draw the line is Dan Eaton, a San Diego attorney that specializes in employment law. Dan, thanks for being here.
Sure, Peggy.
Let's get to the legal side of this issue. Can your boss, can your employer ask you to make a specific donation to a candidate or to a campaign?
Well, Peggy, they can't require you to do so. As far as inviting you to do so, for example, saying here's a candidate you might want to consider, that's different. But it's very clear under California law that an employer cannot require an employee to participate in any specific political activity, and that would include donations.
Now, what if they sort of just suggested it or invite you or say, we, urge you to do this? Is this legal?
Urge becomes closer to the line. Suggest is probably not prohibited, but there is this continuum, and the more an employer intrudes into the political life of its employees, the closer to the line it gets, and therefore potentially violating California law.
And how about, just because I've heard some rumors of this actually happening, if they offer you a financial incentive? We will pay you a bonus if you do this, if we will pay you on your lunch hour to go participate in this campaign.
That becomes a problem, because all of a sudden now you're subsidizing an employee's activities and you're implicitly punishing those who don't participate in those activities. And let's get very concrete here. What if an employer specifically reimburses you for a political donation? Well, Peggy, that's money laundering, and that's illegal. The donation has to come freely from the employee out of his or her own funds. It has to be voluntary, and it cannot be reimbursed by the employer.
And you say money laundering, we typically think of that as illegal, illicit drugs, but you can actually do this with political campaigns as well. How come?
Right, and the reason is that when you're talking about money laundering, what you are talking about is hiding essentially the real source of the money. That's essentially the concept of money laundering, even though it's most often associated with drugs. The fact is that if you're trying to hide who the source of the money is, that's illegal, and that is a crime.
How about unions and their members? They encourage people to vote for particular causes.
Perfectly legal, Peggy. The fact is that unions can do that. It's part of their mission, as a matter of fact. But here's the important thing. Members can also opt out of their dues being used for political activities, and many members do.
So then they would just withhold their dues for a particular...
Well, for political activities generally. The Supreme Court has said that members have that right, and many members do exercise it.
What can an employee, union member or not, do if they feel like they are being coerced or otherwise pushed into supporting a political campaign or a political candidate that they don't want to?
Well, Peggy, the first thing is not to call an attorney. As an attorney, I really get a little scared saying that, but to object, simply say, I don't really feel comfortable doing this. And for most employers, that's going to be enough, because California law is very clear that an employee cannot be discharged or threatened with discharge for failing to participate in any particular way that the employer wants its employee to participate politically.
So say no up front before pursuing a...
Say no, and if it goes too far, then eventually, of course, you can call a lawyer, but don't make that your first step.
The first one. Let's talk about churches. Now, pulpit pounding for political causes, legal, not legal?
It's important to make a distinction, Peggy, here between issues on the one hand and political candidates on the other. Dating back to 1954, a little-known senator by the name of Lyndon Johnson of Texas actually proposed the law that was eventually adopted that said 501c3 organizations, including churches, cannot advocate expressly for or against particular political candidates. Why? Because by doing so, you're essentially having these charities subsidize their tax-exempt status, subsidizing political candidates, and that isn't right, and it's a violation of federal law.
But there are things, it is a tax-exempt, we're talking about churches and synagogues, but they can talk on political issues. There's a fine line.
Political issues and ballot initiatives, but they don't have the same freedom that other organizations do. Yes, they can wade into those areas of issues and ballot initiatives, but they have to be very careful that they don't become full-on, primarily focused on in the political process. Their primary focus ought to be on making better souls.
And I know there has been some complaints about that, but no actual punishments as far as you know.
Not recently as far as I know, but there are literally hundreds of referrals in any given election cycle according to the IRS, and there are investigations, but no, none that I can think of in recent years has had their status revoked, and that's really where the financial penalty comes in.
All right, we'll have more information on our website, kpbs.org. Yes. Thanks so much for joining us.
Sure, nice to be here, Peggy.
SeaWorld's veterinarians did some rare surgery this week. They removed cataracts from a young harbor seal rescued at South Mission Beach. The cataracts made the animal functionally blind, so she couldn't catch fish. She was about 30 pounds underweight when rescued. If she's able to catch fish when her incisions are healed, she will be returned to the ocean. The 1925 trial of a young schoolteacher charged with teaching evolution takes center stage again, only this time at the Old Globe Theater. Earlier this week, Peggy sat down with members of the cast and crew to look at why the debate is still relevant.
Inherit the Wind is a fictional retelling of the Scopes monkey trial about teaching Darwin's theory of evolution in the classroom. 80 years later, the topic is still controversial, and the play, written in 1955, remains surprisingly topical. Here to talk about Inherit the Wind is Robert Foxworth, who plays Henry Drummond, the teacher's defense attorney, and Globe scenic designer Ralph Funicello. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
Robert, you've gotten to know the lead character pretty well. Why do you think his character or his message is relevant still?
Well, let me start by saying I think it's unfortunate that it's still relevant today. That we're having this debate still, the battle between science and religion, and the battle between the freedom to think and a kind of authoritarian religiosity. I guess it's a universal thing, and it will probably always go on. And the play addresses that, even though it came out of the McCarthy era, the House On-American Activities Committee period of the 50s. The play was developed in that context from a story from 1925, as you mentioned. And today it has ramifications all over the place, across the political spectrum, across the social and cultural spectrum. So I think it addresses things that are going on right now.
Do you think the writer's approach in this trial makes a difference, that he's approaching it, like you say, maybe addressing bigger issues, not just teaching of evolution?
Yes, exactly, because they are universals, the freedom to think as opposed to being restricted in one's thinking. These seem to be, unfortunately, universal issues. And they also, they've used this opportunity in the framing of these issues to bring in some humor. So there's a lot of humor in it as well. Even though they're very important issues, it makes it easier for us as an audience to absorb what's going on.
Humor is a great lubricant
Absolutely.
for trying to process things. I want to take a look at a scene where you are sparring with the prosecuting attorney. So let's take a look at this and watch it for a second, and then we'll come back and talk about it.
Great.
Meet the prophet from Nebraska.
Please.
Is that the way of things?
No.
God tells Brady what is good. To be against Brady is to be against God.
No. Each man has a free agent.
Then what is Bertram Cates doing in the Hillsborough jail? What if Mr. Cates had enough influence and lung power and money to railroad through the state legislature a law that only Darwin should be taught in school?
Oh, ridiculous. There is only one great truth in the world.
The gospel according to Brady.
And, of course, now that's you, Robert Foxworth, as Henry Drummond, and Adrian Sparks as Matthew Brady, the prosecutor. What I noticed on that, and I'm going to address this to you, Ralph, is the set has a lot of tables. You use the tables to actually create scenes, stacking tables on top of each other often. Was that symbolic?
Not symbolic. The idea was the director's, Adrian Noble. He felt that he didn't want to restrict the play to a realistic courtroom set, which would be very hard for us to achieve outside. What he said to me, if we believe this play is an American classic, we need to treat it like we treat classic plays, which is not to confine them to realistic settings, but to open them up to a much more theatrical setting. And it also enabled him to stage the courtroom in a way that was far more exciting than if you tried to put it in a real courtroom where real people would be in a real courtroom.
Yeah, set back there.
I mean, the only aspect of this, and it's not symbolic, but they are American kitchen tables from sort of, that's the design of them. And I think, in his mind, he said, a kitchen table is the place where these issues get discussed.
The townspeople in the play were holding up signs that had slogans that were very similar to the Comic-Con protesters. Was that a coincidence?
Another unfortunate coincidence. My research for those signs was based on the script, but also images and photos of the actual trial, the Scopes monkey trial, and what the townspeople, what their signs were. It is sad, I suppose you could say, that those same signs, the same slogans are still being held up, and that people are still feel a need to protest in this way.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, we are out of time. Inherit the Wind runs through September 25th at the Old Globe Theater's Festival Stage in Balboa Park. For more information, contact the Old Globe or go to our website, kpbs.org. Thank you both for being here.
Thank
you.
In tonight's Public Square, earlier in the show, we told you about a hoax that involved fake press releases supposedly from the San Diego U.S. Attorney's Office. The fake release threatened to close down local pharmacies with high rates of prescription drug abuse. After the LA Times and other media reported the fake campaign, professional pranksters visiting San Diego admitted to the elaborate hoax. The U.S. Attorney's Office is investigating and won't comment, but you can. When does a hoax go too far? And what, if anything, should happen to the professional pranksters? You can join in on this conversation or comment on any of tonight's news stories by following us on Twitter, liking us on Facebook, or email us at publicsquare@kpbs.org.
Recapping tonight's top stories, immigration officials are getting ready to implement a plan for granting temporary work permits to young illegal immigrants. They'll start taking applications on August 15th. The permits will cost $465. To be eligible, applicants must have arrived in the U.S. before turning 16. They have to be under 30 years old, and they have to have lived in the U.S. at least 5 years. Applicants also have to be in school, graduated, or in the military. They're disqualified if they've been convicted of a felony, 3 misdemeanors, or 1 significant misdemeanor, such as driving under the influence or gun or sex offenses. And San Diego's Bumblebee Foods is one of 3 tuna packers who've reached a multi-million-dollar settlement over what goes in their cans. The companies were accused of putting too little tuna in the cans. They're not admitting wrongdoing. San Diego is one of 3 counties getting a share of the settlement. And before we leave you, we want to correct the web address we gave you for Operation Homefront. It's operationhomefront.net/SoCal. And you can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thank you for joining us. You have a great weekend.